Hello, everyone. I am Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope, and welcome back to WIWR. Code Geass Lelouch of the Resurrection is a sequel, not to the original Code Geass show, but to the summary movies that, admittedly, I never watched. Nothing seemed too terribly out of place with it. Lelouch was even still at the cart, in the cart at the end, like the old theory went. But Shirley was alive. I think that's the only difference that I saw. Best I could tell, the summary films just bring you back wherever, just are exactly the same except for that detail. Anyway, Lelouch comes back from the dead. He became immortal, as the theory went, or semi-immortal, one should say, but he came back brain dead, and he spends the first part of the film being brain dead, and then he comes back, and then he Lelouches it up with his master plan and his big brain energy. There is a period of peace going on in the world, and that all changes when the fucking kingdom of Zilkistan or something like that attacks, and they're ran by Geass users who want to do something. I'm not entirely clear. I think they want to recreate God, the thing Lelouch destroyed in fucking season 2. I don't fully understand what their plan was, but they kidnap Nonale, and that's fucking got Lelouch's goat all cooked. So he ends up teaming up with the Black Knights and, to a lesser extent, the remnants of the Britannian Empire, and they're all like, we're gonna get Nonale back. But surprise, surprise, the main villain has a Geass of her own, and it's time travel. The movie is a bit long for my taste, definitely drags a bit. I would have cut a little out of it. But I will say, and also the Lelouch's brain dead plot goes on for too long. I probably wouldn't have even had that in the first place. It was pretty entertaining, all things considered. It definitely just felt like something they tacked on to the end of the series that isn't necessary, partially because the original ending was so good. But with this, it does feel unnecessary, but it's also something to be appreciated. It's almost sort of like a fan ending in a way. This feels like the ending to the series that you didn't get, but you always secretly wanted. Fight Iczer 1 is about a bunch of aliens that invade Earth, and they somehow infect people and turn them into horrible Cronenbergian monsters. So an alien android named Iczer 1 comes down to Earth to form a partnership with a human girl so that they can defeat the aliens while fighting in a giant robot whose name I don't remember. They're taking on the main villain, who's Big Gold. It's the leader of the aliens. It's the greatest name ever. Big Gold. Super creative. And it creates an android called Iczer 2 that also partners up with this other alien to fight in another giant robot. It is a surprisingly brutal anime, considering it's an OVA from the 80s, early 90s. I guess it shouldn't be super surprised because that everything was pretty brutal back then. But yeah, there's a decent amount of surprisingly violent images, and it just kills the shit out of a lot more characters than you'd normally expect. It is okay. There's nothing too notable about it. Iczer 3, Iczer Reborn is what people who don't watch anime think anime is. The basic plot is that Big Gold, the main villain of the first Iczer 1 anime, his daughter, Gold Neos, I think, or Neos Gold, something like that, is in a battle against Iczer 1, and then Iczer 1 gets injured, so Gold Neos ends up attacking Earth while Iczer 1 is out of commission, and ends up devastating Earth, and so they end up sending a new Iczer, Iczer 3, down to Earth to form a partnership with this girl called Nagisa. This is in the future. Humanity has spaceships. I think the original Iczer was also slightly futuristic, but this is just there's a moon base. This is just straight up the future now. And so it's up to this childlike Iczer 3 to defend the world against Neos Gold's forces. And then there is a clone of her called like Atros, I think, who ends up showing up, and she has to fight her, but then they win her over with the power of friendship, and then Iczer 2 shows up at the end, and they manage to fucking face turn her. This show has everything you would think an anime would have if you know nothing about anime. The characters have like outrageously large eyes. The plot makes little to no sense. There's giant robots. There's like blatant like over-sexualization for the characters, but like the first one had that 80s over-sexualization where there's just like straight up tits or something and like violence, but this tones all of that way down. And it's just like sort of like a revealing outfit, but it doesn't go all the way. Like there's no nipples or anything. So it doesn't go as hard as the 80s one did, which I think kind of shows the difference between 80s OVAs and 90s OVAs also. It's an interesting timepiece. Basically, if you can imagine the most like stereotypical anime thing possible, it's probably in this one. And I mean like what normies think is a stereotypical anime thing. One thing we'll talk about is the voice of Iczer 3 is incredibly childlike, but the actress wasn't that good. And I come to find out that the probable reasoning for this is that Iczer 3 was voiced by a former female professional wrestler named Cutie Suzuki, I believe. Yeah, that's interesting. This is pretty boring overall, but an interesting timepiece. Iczelion. Okay, so what happens is, sometime after Neos Gold fucks up Earth, apparently Earth technology gets sent back to, like, modern times, or probably 90s specifically level technology, because for whatever reason, this is definitely a sequel to Iczer 3, but just doesn't have spaceships and shit. I don't know why, but so the Iczers are overwhelmed by having so many androids attacking them all throughout space as they try to save space that they have to create little tiny miniature robots called Ixels, which they then send to planets to merge with girls to create like power suits, to create Iczelions. And an Iczelion is supposed to have the same power level as a regular old Iczer, probably minus the giant mech, so probably just straight up Iczer level, right? So Earth, now at modern technology levels, despite having spaceships in the previous series, is attacked by a group of androids called Cross and Chaos, who are like these twin androids. And this girl named Nagisa, who is not the same Nagisa as the previous Iczers, is attacked, and she is ended up chosen to be one of the Iczelions as her and Earth is attacked by the androids from space. And then at the end, it ends in a sort of like Halo 2 cliffhanger type thing where she finally accepts that she's going to be an Iczelion after like not wanting to do it for the first episode, right? And her friends are like, Nagisa, where are you going? And she turns to her friends and is like, call me Iczelion. And then it just goes to credits. So this doesn't end. As far as like the nudity versus violence scale, it has more than Iczer 3, but less than the original Iczer 1. There is one scene where I think Iczer Black it's like an extended, like not her transform state, like her regular state, like dancing in a nightclub. Pretty well animated, but it loops the same decent animation like 5 times in a row. Besides that, there is literally nothing to note about this. Fight is a half-hour OVA where a teenage boy is next in line to become the head demon slayer of his family, and he's given a spirit sword, which is a sword that has a spirit inhabiting it, so that he can slay demons. And on his way to school, he has a disagreement with the spirit, and he ends up dropping it, and it gets picked up by an antiquarian who ends up selling it to a demon, and he's got to get it back. It's only a half hour. It sets up a bunch of plot points that never pay off, and just throws a bunch of terms at you that I don't know what was happening. I understood the main plot of boy needs to get sword back. Jesus Christ, I have no idea what the background was happening. It was just a mess. It very much felt like they were trying to make like a show of it or a series of OVAs, and it just did not happen. And honestly, this wasn't a great showing for a show anyway, so I can see why it was never picked up. Pianoman is a short anime about a man who wakes up in a sort of other world with a piano and some other musical instruments and a big-ass door, and he has no idea why he's there and has no real memory of, like, who he is or anything that happens. And he ends up opening the door and sort of awakening the world around him and the creatures that live there by playing music with the surrounding instruments before trying to leave. I think it might be a sort of like metaphor for music as a whole, as how it sort of like colors the world around it. Or this could just be a fun animation and there could be no greater meaning to it. Or even my original thought of it being a metaphor about music itself could just be a very surface level understanding of it. I don't really know. It was an entertaining watch. Love is Like a Cocktail episode 14 was a surprise when it came out. I don't remember if I ever talked about Love is Like a Cocktail on WIWR, but basically it's about a woman who married a man who I think used to be a bartender or is currently a bartender. I don't think he works anymore, but he makes her cocktails and then she like loosens up, and it's a cute little romance. And episode 14 is her saying that unfortunately this year they don't seem to be able to go to a hot spring. So while she's in the bath, he makes her a sort of hot spring cocktail. It's cute. Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere, XXI-PV. So the thing about Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere is, although I really like it, it is also one of the most complicated settings I've ever seen in anything. And if I'm being totally honest, I don't fully remember what the setting is. It's very weird and convoluted. It involves time and shit. I remember it being something like Fate if it tried too hard and also simultaneously gave up. So I guess just normal Fate. I think this special is about the characters going up in a competition against an alternate version of themselves from another timeline where they didn't manage to save the world. Maybe. I have no fucking clue. Anyway, cool fight animations at the very least, and there was a flash of all of your favorite characters. So at the very least, you got your fan service in. A Certain Scientific Accelerator special. So this is about Accelerator. He's in the hospital recovering from probably the ending of the Accelerator anime, which was not very good, if I remember correctly. And also, he goes to a ramen shop and eats ramen. And also, there are scenes where he answers riddles. And this made me very hungry, but it was also pretty funny how he kept, like, declaring in his head how he's going to eat the ramen, and then metal music just started playing. Koyomi History is a short anime, which is an adaptation of a short story from the Monogatari series, and it's just basically Araragi just thinking about his relationships with the main girls, and by main girls, I mean the ones that have the most stories about them. There managed to be some pretty good lines in this, as one would expect from Monogatari, and honestly, some of the lines, especially about Natte, is just heartbreaking. Pretty good watch. Getsuyoubi no Tawawa is about salarymen interacting with usually younger, big-boobed women in their life, often in semi-romantic ways, but the show itself never goes fully romantic with any of the relationships, just sort of hints that the two characters might have a thing for each other, and nothing in it really happens. It's just a lot of fan service. Thanks for watching. There should be one episode every week in February. I have been Sacrabolic, your envoy of hope, and this has been WIWR. Bye-bye.